In the River Vale kingdom of Thornwild, where the wolves ran in bloodlines older than the throne, and a creature's worth was read from its pedigree the way merchants read a coin, there was a saying the high folk spoke, half in jest and half in iron. The blood shows. It always shows. It meant that breeding was destiny, that a wolf of the royal line was royal in its bones, and a cur of no line was a cur to its marrow. No amount of kindness or care could lift a low thing above the rank its blood had fixed. The great hounds and dire wolves of Thornwild's court were bred with pride, and even the lowest of them outranked the highest commoner because the lowest of them had lineage. And lineage was everything. Meis had no lineage at all. A bloodless foundling raised in the filth of the kennels, she was the lowest of the low. A girl who mucked the runs of beasts that outranked her, whose own blood was a blank no one had ever bothered to read. She had made her peace with it the way those at the bottom always must, by going unnoticed, and by loving the only things in Thornwild that loved her back without checking her pedigree first. The animals, the broken ones, especially the runts, the rejects, and the small discarded creatures the kennel masters called culls for having the wrong blood. She did not know that on a cold morning at the river's edge she would find a half-drowned stray puppy that every expert eye in the kingdom would call worthless, or that she would keep it anyway against all sense, or that the king himself would one day mock the mongrel at her heel, until, in the great hall before the whole court, every royal wolf in Thornwild lowered itself to the ground and bowed before the worthless stray. Chapter 1. She found it in the river shallows on a gray morning, more dead than alive. By every rule of Thornwild, she should have left it there. Meis had gone down to the river at dawn to haul water for the kennel runs, as she did every morning. She heard it before she saw it. A thin, broken sound carried beneath the rush of the current, the particular cry of a small thing that had stopped expecting to be answered. She followed the sound to where the reeds choked the shallows. There, tangled in weeds, half submerged and shaking, was a puppy. It was a wretched-looking thing. She could see that even soaked and shivering. Its coat was a muddy, colorless shade, neither the silver of the royal line nor the black of the war strain, nor any of the proud colors the court bred for. Its legs were too long. Its ears sat wrong. One ear was torn. It was, in the cold language of the kennel masters, a cull, the kind of mongrel pup breeders drowned at birth for having the wrong blood, tossed into the river in a sack so the line would stay clean. Someone had done exactly that. She realized a litter had been culled, and the wrong-blooded pup had been thrown into the river to die. The sack had snagged in the reeds. The puppy had clawed its way halfway out and had been clinging to life by its torn ear all night. She knew what she was supposed to do. She was supposed to leave it, or finish it the way the kennel masters would. Cull was a cull. The blood showed, and this blood showed nothing. No lineage, no worth. A mongrel even the breeders had judged unfit to live. Meis stepped into the freezing river and gathered the shaking little creature against her chest. "There now," she murmured as it pressed its cold muzzle into her neck and trembled. "Somebody threw you away because your blood came out wrong. I know about that. My blood came out wrong too. Came out nothing, as far as anyone has ever bothered to read. So we're a matched pair of culls, you and me. And I've never yet seen the sense in drowning a thing just because of what its blood says it's worth. Come on. You'll not die in a sack today. Not while I have a warm corner to put you in." She carried it back to the kennels, hidden beneath her shawl, and told no one. A foundling keeping a cull was breaking a rule older than the kennels themselves. But Meis had spent her whole life being judged worthless because of her blood. She would be damned before she judged another living thing the same way. She raised it in secret in the cold corner of the kennel loft where she slept. And it grew. It grew strangely. She had expected it to remain small and sickly, a cull, after all, the runt of a culled litter. Instead, it ate whatever scraps she could steal. It slept warmly beside her. Week after week, it grew into something she could not quite understand. It was not handsome by the court standards. His coat remained that muddy, colorless shade. His frame stayed lanky and unusual. Yet it grew larger than any puppy its age had a right to be. And there was something in the way it carried itself, a stillness, a watchfulness. The other kennel beasts, the proud royal wolves in their runs, grew strangely quiet whenever she walked the mongrel past. Not hostile, not fearful, simply attentive. Their great heads turned to follow it, their ears lifted forward. Meis did not understand it. She dismissed it as the foolish pride every owner feels toward an ugly pet. She named it Ash for its dull gray color and because it had risen from a place that should have killed it. "You're a strange one, Ash," she told it one evening, scratching behind its torn ear. "The royal beasts go quiet for you. I don't know why. You're a cull and a mongrel. The breeders threw you into a river. Yet you walk past the proudest wolves in Thornwild as though you own the place, and they let you. Maybe you've got delusions of grandeur. Maybe that's the only thing your blood gave you. A cull's nerve. Well, good. The world told both of us we were worth nothing. We might as well refuse to believe it." Ash gazed at her with its odd mismatched eyes and leaned its growing weight against her. She thought no more about why the royal wolves went quiet. She should have. The kennel masters had begun to notice. And kennel masters did not like things they could not explain. A cull mongrel that the royal beasts deferred to, kept in secret by a foundling who had no right to keep anything. Word climbed, as word always does, from the kennels toward the keep. And one cold morning a royal steward arrived with 2 guards. "The king has heard," the steward announced, "that a foundling is hiding a beast in his majesty's kennels. His Majesty wishes to see this mongrel for himself. You will bring it to the Great Hall, where such irregularities are judged." The Great Hall of Thornwild was the proudest room in the kingdom. Its walls hung with the pedigrees of 40 generations. The entire court turned to watch the foundling enter with the cull at her heel. Meis had never been inside such a place. She had never wanted to be. She kept her eyes lowered and one hand resting lightly on Ash's head. She could feel the court's contempt falling upon her like cold rain. A kennel drudge, blood blank, dragging a muddy mongrel into the hall of bloodlines. The nobles drew back their fine robes as she passed. The great court wolves resting beside their masters lifted their heads. Upon the high throne sat the king. Meis had only ever seen him from a distance during feast days. King Veyron Thornwolf. 3 years upon the throne. Young, hard, cold-eyed. A man descended from the oldest bloodline in the kingdom. A man for whom the blood shows was not merely a saying, it was a creed. His gaze passed over Meis, dismissing her instantly as the nothing her blood declared her to be. Then his eyes settled upon the creature at her heel. The king of Thornwild laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It echoed around the great hall, and the court joined him because the court always laughed when the king laughed. The sound washed over Meis and the muddy stray alike. "So," Veyron said when the laughter had faded enough for him to speak, "this is what my kennel masters lost sleep over. A foundling with no blood hiding a cull with even less." He leaned forward, cold amusement shining in his eyes. "Look at it. The wrong color, the wrong frame, a torn ear. A mongrel the breeders judged unfit and drowned. And you fished it out of a river, girl, then fed it stolen scraps in my own loft." The court chuckled again. "I'll grant you a soft heart, but a soft heart is a luxury reserved for those with blood to spare. You have none. That thing is worth nothing, less than nothing. It is proof of a breeding mistake. The blood shows, girl, and that blood shows a cur." He leaned back upon his throne. "Take it to the river. Finish what the breeders started. Then return to the kennel runs where your own blood placed you." Meis stood alone in the proud hall beneath the laughter of the court and the king's contempt. Then the quiet, stubborn courage she had carried all her life finally rose within her, and refused to stay silent. "No," she said. ###. The hall fell silent. No one said no to the king of Thornwild. Certainly not a blood-blank foundling with a cull at her heel. Veyron's cold amusement sharpened into something far more dangerous. "***, no? ***, he repeated, as though tasting a foreign word. "No, my lord." Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. She forced herself to lift her eyes toward the high throne. "I will not take him to the river. You may call him a cull, a mongrel and worthless, and every expert eye in your kingdom would agree with you. I know the blood shows nothing in him. I will not argue that. She rested her hand gently on Ash's head. The muddy stray stood calm and motionless beside her in the silent hall. But you are wrong about what that means, my lord. Worth is more than what the blood shows, and I'll tell you why. I'm the lowest thing standing in this hall. My blood shows nothing. I'm a cull too. Blood blank. Kennel raised. Judged worth less than the beasts I clean up after. I've spent my whole life watching this court drown things because of their breeding, and crown others because of theirs, without ever once looking at what a creature truly is. The courage inside her carried her beyond fear, beyond reason. You say his blood shows a cur. I say I raised him from a half-drowned scrap, and the proudest wolves in your kennels grow quiet whenever he passes. I don't know why. Neither do you, because you've never once looked at a thing without reading its pedigree first. So no, I will not drown him simply to prove your creed. If you want him dead for the crime of bad blood, my lord, you will have to do it yourself. Here, before your whole court. And then see whether your fine wolves find it as amusing as you do. No one laughed. The hall had become utterly still, the kind of silence that follows a dangerous truth. The king slowly rose from his throne. Meis braced herself, certain she had just condemned both herself and Ash. Veyron descended from the dais with measured steps. At his side walked his own great wolf, the proudest beast in the kingdom. Silver-coated, royal to its marrow. 15 generations of the purest blood in Thornwild. Then let us settle this, the king said quietly, by the only language that matters. My wolf is the highest blood in this kingdom. Yours is the lowest mud the river spat back. We shall see which blood the wolves choose. He gestured toward the great silver wolf. When my beast throws your cur into the dust, girl, you will carry what remains to the river, and you will finally have your answer about what worth the blood truly shows. The royal wolf stepped forward. Massive, proud, silent. It approached the lanky muddy stray. Then it stopped. It looked directly into Ash's mismatched eyes. And the proudest wolf in Thornwild slowly lowered its great silver head, bent its forelegs, and bowed. ###. Silence consumed the great hall. The king's own wolf, 15 generations of the purest blood, the highest beast in Thornwild, lay in the dust before the muddy cull, its silver muzzle pressed against the floor in complete submission, the way a wolf bowed only before its rightful pack leader. Then another wolf lowered itself, and another, then another. Around the hall, every royal wolf rose from beside its master, turned toward the muddy stray, and bowed. Within moments, every ancient bloodline in Thornwild lay prostrate before the half-drowned mongrel the breeders had thrown into the river. Ash stood among them, calm and unmoving. The muddy, colorless cull accepted the homage of the entire kingdom as though it were the most natural thing in the world. King Veyron stared at the impossible sight. Color drained from his face. That isn't possible. His voice had become little more than a whisper. My wolf does not bow. It is the highest blood in the kingdom. It bows to nothing. It bows only to me. His eyes lifted slowly toward Meis. Now they were no longer filled with pride. Only disbelief. What is that creature? What did you pull from the river? I don't know, my lord, Meis answered honestly. I swear it. I found a half-drowned cull trapped among the reeds. I couldn't leave him to die because no one deserves to be drowned for their blood. That's all I know. I named him Ash. I fed him scraps. I loved him because he had been thrown away, just like me. She looked around the hall at the bowed wolves. But your wolves know something we don't, my lord. They've been trying to tell me for months. I simply failed to understand. They grow quiet whenever he passes. They watch him. I thought it was only my imagination. It wasn't. The blood you trust so completely is bowing before him. Perhaps you should ask your wolves what he truly is. They seem to know far better than either of us. The thorn wolf looked down at his silver companion, the beast whose blood he had trusted more than anything his entire life. For the first time since becoming king, Veyron knelt. He placed one hand upon his wolf's silver head and asked, in the ancient wordless language shared between an alpha and his companion, "What do you see?" The wolf did not rise. It simply turned its eyes toward the muddy stray. Veyron understood, and the color left his face completely. ###. The judgment never ended that day. Could not. A king whose own sacred creed had just bowed before a river cull could no longer speak about worth as though nothing had happened. Instead, he ordered that Meis and Ash remain within the keep, far above the kennels. The court whispered in outrage. Yet every evening the king came to visit them, not because he wished to imprison them, but because the impossible sight in the great hall had shaken the very foundation of everything he believed. At first, Meis thought he merely wished to study Ash before eventually sending them away. She prepared herself for disappointment. It never came. Instead, the king spoke with her, truly spoke. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he held an honest conversation with someone whose blood he had once considered beneath notice. Slowly, she came to know the man hidden beneath the proud king. A man who had spent his entire life believing breeding was destiny, that the high were high by right, the low were low by right, that blood decided everything. Now even his own wolves had rejected that certainty, and it frightened him, because if the blood could be wrong about one cull, then perhaps it had been wrong about everything. The lords he trusted, the foundlings he ignored, every life in his kingdom he had judged without ever truly seeing. One evening, as Ash slept peacefully beside the fire, Meis studied the king's troubled face. "You're frightened," she said softly. "Not of Ash, but of what he means." Veyron looked at her without speaking. "If your wolves bow before something the blood calls worthless," she continued, "then perhaps the blood has been lying to you. About him, about me, about everyone." The king's eyes drifted toward the muddy stray sleeping by the fire. "There is an old legend," he said quietly, "older than the throne itself, older than all our bloodlines. The old keepers called them the trueborn, not wolves born from the purest blood, but wolves born from none at all. Culls, mongrels, the river throne." He drew a slow breath. "Our ancestors spent 40 generations breeding wolves for silver coats, strong frames, perfect pedigrees, and in doing so, perhaps they bred away the oldest, truest wolf nature. Every so often, that ancient blood returns, not among the pure lines, but in the very creatures we've judged unworthy. Every wolf alive recognizes it on sight. Every wolf bows." His hands tightened into fists. "My breeders, 4 generations. They drowned culls. How many trueborn have we thrown into the river? How many times has this kingdom drowned the very best of itself, simply because it did not look beautiful enough for our creed?" ###. The proposal came on a night near the turning of the season, after the king had begun, clumsily but sincerely, learning a new way of seeing. He no longer judged creatures by their blood alone. Instead, he walked beside Meis through the kennels, watching the wolves as she watched them. Not for what they had been bred to be, but for what they truly were. He looked at the foundlings, the kennel drudges, the forgotten, as though seeing them for the very first time. In truth, he was unlearning a creed that had ruled Thornwild for 40 generations. It was slow work, humbling work. And as Meis watched him struggle to change, she found herself unable to ignore what it awakened in her own heart. One quiet evening they stood beside the fire. Ash slept peacefully between them. Veyron broke the silence. "Stay." Meis smiled sadly. "My lord, I'm only a kennel drudge with a cull. There's nowhere for me except the kennel runs." The cold pride that had once defined the Thornwolf was gone. He looked at her with quiet certainty. "I would make you my queen." Meis stared at him. "Not because your stray is some sacred trueborn," he continued quickly. "Never because of that. I ask because you were the foundling who stood before my whole court while they laughed, and told the king his creed was blind. You pulled a drowning cull from the river because you believed no creature deserved to die for its blood. You were right, more right than 40 generations of my family. You shamed us all with the very thing we had thrown away. He gently raised his hand to her cheek. You looked at something the world called worthless, and saw worth. My entire kingdom was built on doing the opposite. Teach me to see the way you do. Marry me. The answer rose within her almost instantly. Yes. But behind that single word stood a lifetime of painful truth. Blood blank, foundling, kennel girl, and before her stood a king descended from the oldest bloodline in Thornwild. My lord, she whispered, the moment you make me queen, every noble in this kingdom will see a blood-blank drudge sitting beside the throne. The living insult to everything they believe. She stepped away. They will never accept me. They'll say the cull bewitched you, and that the kennel girl finished the job. They'll tear your kingdom apart just to tear me down. You proved their creed wrong. That doesn't make me safe. It makes me dangerous. Her voice grew softer. Please, keep me where I belong. Let me remain a keeper of the kennels. Let me care for the culls you no longer drown. That is worth far more than wearing a crown that would only divide your kingdom. 3 days later, the lords came, and they brought the old creed with them like a drawn blade. Lord Caradoc, the proudest among them, whose bloodline reached nearly as far back as the king's own, had watched Veyron change with growing horror. The king had spared culls, raised a blood-blank foundling into the keep, spoken openly of worth beyond blood. To Caradoc, it was nothing less than heresy. So he gathered the proud lords of Thornwild behind him and entered the great hall. Meis stood there with Ash at her side. The king had summoned her. She did not yet know why. Caradoc stepped forward. Your Majesty, he declared loudly. We come for the sake of Thornwild itself. Your father and his fathers before him built this kingdom upon one eternal truth. The blood shows. The high are high because of their blood. The low are low because of theirs. It is the order of the world. It is the foundation of this throne. His contemptuous gaze settled on Meis. And yet you would place a blood-blank kennel drudge beside you. A girl with no lineage. A cull and a trick that deceived this court. He pointed toward Ash. We will not permit it. If your Majesty abandons the creed of blood, then you abandon Thornwild itself. Cast aside the drudge. Drown the cull as the law commands. Return to the truth that built this kingdom, or we shall find a king who honors his blood. Caradoc's great wolf bared its teeth toward Ash. The blood shows, your Majesty. It always shows. And hers shows nothing. The hall waited. King Veyron slowly rose from his throne. The cold that radiated from him was unlike anything the nobles had ever seen. You're right, Caradoc, he said quietly. The blood shows. It always shows. So let us allow it to speak once more. Exactly as it did 3 days ago. He descended from the dais. Bring forward your wolves. Bring me the finest blood your noble houses possess. And let us see what the blood truly bows to. Before anyone could move, Meis stepped forward. She stood beside the king, not behind him, facing Caradoc and every noble gathered in the great hall. You want the blood to speak? Her voice trembled, but only for a moment. So do I, but understand what you're asking. She rested her hand gently upon Ash's head. The muddy stray stood quietly beside her. You have built your world upon the belief that noble blood is worthy blood. But your own wolves already told you otherwise. They'll tell you again today, and this time, you won't be able to laugh. She looked slowly across the gathered nobles. For 40 generations you've bred wolves for silver coats, strong frames, beautiful pedigrees. You thought those things made them greater. But while breeding for beauty, you bred away the oldest, truest wolf nature. And that ancient truth appeared in the one place none of you ever cared to look. She looked down at Ash. In a river-thrown cull, her eyes met Caradoc's. For 40 generations, you have been drowning the truest blood in Thornwild. Not because it lacked worth, but because it failed to look beautiful enough for your creed. She gestured toward the gathered wolves. Don't believe me. Believe them. Bring your finest blood forward. Let them decide. Certain of victory, Caradoc signaled his magnificent wolf. The great beast strode confidently toward Ash. Then, it stopped. It looked into the muddy stray's mismatched eyes. And slowly, it lowered its head, bent its forelegs, and bowed. One by one, every noble wolf followed. Soon the entire great hall was filled with proud bloodlines kneeling before the muddy river-thrown stray exactly as they had done 3 days before. The whole blood of Thornwild, 40 generations of noble breeding, lay in the dust before the creature they had called worthless. Caradoc stared at his own bowed wolf, the certainty of his entire life shattered before his eyes. Veyron faced the stunned court. "There," he said. "There's your blood showing, Caradoc. It has been trying to teach this kingdom for 40 generations. You simply refused to listen." He looked around the silent hall. "The truest thing in Thornwild was never written in your pedigrees. It was the creature you kept throwing into the river." He reached for Meis' hand, her blood-blank hand, there in the hall of 40 generations, surrounded by bowed wolves. "The creed changes today. No longer will we judge worth by bloodlines. No longer will we drown culls. From this day forward, we will look at what a creature truly is." Then he turned to Meis. "I do not want the queen your pedigrees approve of. I want the foundling who stood before my court while they laughed, and proved that my kingdom had been blind. Marry me. Teach Thornwild to see as you see, because the blood has shown me something this winter." He smiled. "The most worthwhile soul in my kingdom was the one I once called worthless." Lord Caradoc slowly fell to one knee. Others resisted, for a time. But a lord whose own wolf bowed before the muddy stray could not forever insist that the stray was worthless. One after another, the proud nobles knelt. # 1 year later, the kennels of Thornwild were a very different place. The culling river ran clean. Not a single breeder had thrown a wrong-blooded pup into its waters in an entire year, because the creed that had once condemned them was gone. The kennel runs were now filled with the river-thrown, the mongrels, and the wrong-colored pups, all raised with care instead of fear. They were watched over by a queen who had once been a cull herself, a blood-blank foundling who judged every creature not by its blood, but by what it truly was. That had scandalized the court more than anything else. A blood-blank kennel girl had become queen, and yet every morning she still walked down to the kennels with her own hands, tending the culls and caring for the forgotten creatures the old kingdom would have drowned. No one called her the drudge anymore. They simply had not yet found another name worthy enough. The children had. The queen the wolves bowed to, though it had truly been Ash they bowed before. Meis always thought the children had somehow understood the deeper truth. The wolves had bowed to Ash. The kingdom had bowed to compassion. And the two had become impossible to separate. The forgotten legend of the trueborn was no longer hidden, no longer feared, no longer drowned. Instead, the king's own breeders searched for them. With humility replacing pride, they studied the river-thrown mongrels, hoping to rediscover the ancient wolf nature that 40 generations of careful breeding had nearly erased. Ash, the muddy, colorless cull the king had once ordered to be drowned, now rested peacefully beside the throne. Where once the proud royal wolf had lain, Ash now kept silent watch. The royal wolf lay beside him without jealousy, content, because the blood had finally sorted itself according to truths far deeper than silver coats and perfect pedigrees. One clear evening, King Veyron walked down to the kennels. He still visited often. Some places, he believed, should never lose the shape that had changed history. He found Meis kneeling among a new litter of rescued river-thrown pups. Ash watched over them quietly with his mismatched eyes. In the king's hand rested something small, a carefully cleaned, weathered scrap of rough sacking. The very sack in which Ash had been thrown into the river a year before. He had ordered it preserved. Without a word, he placed it gently into Meis' hands. "I had this kept," he said softly, "after I learned what they threw him away in." His eyes rested on the worn cloth. "We believed the greatest treasure in Thornwild was our blood. 40 generations of pedigrees, silver coats, perfect frames, pure bloodlines." He slowly closed her fingers around the old sack. "We were wrong. The most valuable thing in this kingdom was the one we kept throwing into the river. He looked toward Ash. The truest thing, the real thing, the one that wasn't handsome enough for our creed. Generation after generation, we drowned the very best of ourselves without ever realizing it. His voice grew quieter. I once ordered you to finish what the breeders had started. I told you to take him back to the river. He smiled gently. And you stood before my entire court and simply said, no. With one half-drowned cull, you shattered 40 generations of certainty. He brushed a strand of hair away from her face. The greatest treasures in my kingdom, Meis, were the 2 lives it judged worthless, the muddy stray and the girl who refused to let him drown. Meis laughed, a warm, easy laugh that came naturally now. She placed the weathered sack upon the kennel wall, keeping it as a reminder that the greatest truths often arrive wrapped in the things the world throws away. Around her, the rescued river-thrown pups tumbled and played together. None of them would ever know the river that had nearly claimed Ash. None of them would ever be judged before they had lived. Ash watched over them quietly. The entire kingdom had once bowed before him. Yet he remained exactly what Meis had always seen. A loyal companion. Beside him knelt the king. Beside the king knelt the queen. Together they cared for the creatures the old creed had abandoned. Meis looked across the lively kennels and smiled. She had always known only one way to measure worth. Not by blood, not by birth, not by pedigree, but by kindness, by courage, by the life that still fought to survive after the world had already decided to throw it away. She remembered the tiny puppy clinging to life by one torn ear among the freezing reeds. She remembered lifting him from the river. She remembered refusing to let him die. And in the end, the worth that never showed in the blood, the worth hidden inside the creature the world had judged and discarded, the worth no pedigree could ever measure, had bowed an entire kingdom, and had proven itself worthy of a crown.